Miranda twirled in front of the mirror in the fitting room of a wedding salon, trying on one dress after another and admiring each one. She felt like a princess from a fairy tale, one she had never even dared to dream about. "What a beautiful dress!" the young woman smiled to herself, thinking dreamily, "How lucky I am. My Jason is the best." It was impossible to find anyone like him, not even in a million years. He was rich, athletic, kind, and always so understanding. Since birth, Miranda had felt as if she were haunted by an evil fate, but now, she was so happy. It felt as though Jason was a reward for everything she had endured. Miranda was an orphan. Her mother hadn't died or gotten sick. Nothing tragic like that had happened. No, her mother had simply given birth to her, then abandoned her without a second glance, without even giving her a name. From the maternity hospital, the little girl was sent first to a home for babies and then to an orphanage. Throughout her childhood, Miranda harbored deep resentment toward her mother. She couldn't understand why she had been born if she wasn't wanted. How could her mother so callously abandon her child, never think of her, and live her life in peace? Life in the orphanage wasn't easy for Miranda. She couldn't see a world beyond those bleak government walls. She had to fight with the older kids. Sometimes they took her lunch, stole her things, and constantly teased her. She probably wouldn't have survived alone and might have even broken down, but she had a best friend, Grace, who was just like her. Grace was also an orphan. Her mother had died in a drunken stupor. The girls stuck together, and it became easier to learn and fight back when they had each other. They even looked similar, both with long blonde hair and neat little noses. Many people mistook Miranda and Grace for sisters. When Grace was 9 years old, a family wanted to adopt her, but she refused to go without Miranda. The two friends loved sitting on the windowsill, their legs dangling down, dreaming of the day they would leave the orphanage, fall in love with handsome princes, and be the happiest people in the world. The girls understood each other without needing to speak much. They shared their most intimate secrets, sorrows, and grievances, making life a little easier for both of them. One day, when Miranda was in 7th grade, the children were taken to the river to swim, a rare and exciting event for the orphanage kids, who had seen little beyond the shelter's walls. No one, however, warned them about the river's fast current or the dangerous whirlpools. Miranda and Grace decided to swim to the other side to pick lilies that beckoned them with their beauty, despite the strict rule forbidding it. Neither of them were great swimmers, but the river didn't seem that wide, and they were confident they could manage it together. Halfway across, Miranda suddenly felt a sharp cramp in her leg. Panic surged through her as she screamed and flailed, struggling to stay afloat. The other children panicked too, unsure of what to do. Most of them couldn't swim at all. Meanwhile, the frightened caregiver jumped into the water and swam desperately to save the girls. Grace rushed to help, somehow managing to lift Miranda to the surface. Miranda clung desperately to a log, gasping for air, coughing, and spitting out water. Unfortunately, Grace wasn't as lucky. The turbulent current carried her straight into a whirlpool, and her body was never found. The loss of her friend was a devastating blow for Miranda. She screamed uncontrollably at Grace's funeral, consumed with guilt, blaming herself for her death. After the tragedy, Miranda was admitted to a psychiatric hospital, where she was treated with strong medications that barely helped her regain a sense of self. She became withdrawn, quiet, and filled with sorrow, so much so that even the boys began to avoid her, thinking she was crazy. Upon leaving the orphanage, Miranda, now a full orphan, was given a tiny apartment in a crowded building. During her time at the shelter, she had witnessed many broken lives. The girls often became night fairies, used by anyone who wanted them, while the boys sank deeper into ruin, injecting illegal substances, smoking, or drinking heavily. Many had already ended up in juvenile detention centers for theft, which was common in the orphanage. But Miranda had made a firm decision. She refused to follow the same path. Despite everything, especially her mother's abandonment, she vowed to make something of her life. She was determined to become someone. Miranda managed to find a job as a waitress at a small, cozy restaurant. The owner, feeling sorry for the poor orphan, hired her on a probationary period. The work itself was straightforward, and Miranda handled her duties well. However, learning to get along with people and maintain a positive attitude was far more challenging. Children who had grown up in orphanages often struggled to adjust to the outside world. Miranda was fortunate to receive help from her coworker, Polly. Initially, Polly was surprised that someone as unsociable as Miranda could work as a waitress, a job that not only required quick service, but also friendly communication and the ability to get along with customers. Polly decided to help Miranda. "Dear, this won't work. You'll scare off all the regular customers. Why do you look so disgruntled? Like you just drank vinegar. You're young and pretty, use that. Carry the tray, relax, smile, and think of something good. You'll see, the tips will get bigger, and the customers will come back more often." Miranda sighed sadly. "That's the problem. There's never been anything good in my life. I've been an orphan since birth, grew up in an orphanage, was humiliated, and my best friend died because of me. The flat they gave me is terrible, full of holes and cracks, no repairs for 100 years. Where am I supposed to find anything good in all that? Besides, I've gotten used to expecting the worst from people. I know you're right, I need to change, but I just don't know how." Polly shook her head. "Well, your fate hasn't been kind, that's for sure, but if you keep focusing on the bad, that's all you'll ever see. Sure, your place is in bad shape, that's a minus. But hey, you don't have to pay rent, that's a plus. I'll help you. On the weekends, we'll put up fresh wallpaper. I've got some extra curtains and a couple of blankets. We'll make it cozy and it'll feel better. And hey, start dreaming about a good man, a groom. Imagine what he'll be like, you'll see, it'll make you smile." Gradually, thanks to Polly's support, Miranda began to loosen up. She smiled more and interacted with customers, and Polly helped her transform her apartment into something far more comfortable. As her surroundings improved, so did her outlook on life. Miranda often imagined what her prince would be like, tall, slim, with kind eyes and strong arms. She dreamed of dancing with him, swirling in a waltz, as he kissed and held her close. And then, one beautiful day, the miracle she had dreamed of happened. The prince from her dreams walked into the restaurant to have lunch. Miranda's heart raced as she brought him his food, beaming a dazzling smile. The guy smiled back and winked. "Hey, beauty, you've got to help me." "It's a matter of life and death," he said, playfully. Naive Miranda took him seriously and asked in a frightened voice, "Of course, I'll help you. What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? We have a first aid kit in the kitchen, should I get it?" The guy's smile widened. "Yes, Cupid's arrow just pierced my heart, and I'll die on the spot if I don't get your phone number. My name's Jason, by the way. And yours?" Miranda blushed up to her ears. "I'm Miranda. Very nice to meet you, but why do you need my phone number, if it's not a secret?" Jason answered honestly, "I want to invite you to the movies tonight. Will you come?" And so, the couple began dating. Jason was tactful, gallant, and gentle, and Miranda's life slowly blossomed from that point on. They passionately kissed, strolled through the city at night, and couldn't stop talking. Miranda knew right away that Jason was the one, her only for life. With him, she felt warm, calm, and safe. At first, she was a little wild and shy, unsure of how to act in places like the theater or at exhibitions. No one had ever taught her such things. But Jason was patient and tactful, gently opening up a whole new world to her. She discovered so much around her that was fascinating. Still, one thing troubled her. "Jason, what will your parents think of me? A poor orphan with no money or education. You're from a family of businessmen. They'll probably be against it." Jason hugged her tightly and reassured her. "Don't worry, everything will be fine. My father is a self-made man. He started from scratch, grew up in a tough neighborhood, and achieved everything through hard work. He even married my mom, who came from a simple village family. Dad can't stand the fake glamour of high society. He loves honest, down-to-earth people. You'll win them over." And that's exactly what happened. When Miranda visited Jason's parents for the first time, she trembled like a leaf. But from the moment she stepped through the door, she was welcomed with warmth and sincerity. To her surprise, their huge house was tastefully furnished but without excess or ostentation. Jason's father was a gray-haired, intelligent man with a neat beard, while his mother, dressed in a simple yet elegant suit, wore minimal makeup, no false eyelashes or artificial nails in sight. Wanting to impress, Miranda had baked a Napoleon cake herself, but worried they would laugh at her, assuming rich people only ate fancy delicacies. However, the dinner went splendidly. At the end of the evening, Miranda offered to help Jason's mother clean up and wash the dishes, a gesture that won her heart completely. She said, "You will be a good daughter-in-law. You aren't afraid of housework, and I respect that. I'm the same way. As you can see, we don't have any servants, even though we could afford them. My husband and I believe that family is a quiet and cozy haven where there is no place for outsiders. The man's job is to earn money and provide, while the woman's job is to maintain the warmth of the home, be a homemaker, and support her spouse. I see that you're a good, modest girl, and I'm at ease knowing my son is with you. I think we'll get along just fine." After 6 months of courtship and passionate dates, Jason proposed to Miranda. She was over the moon with happiness and immediately agreed. Today was the unforgettable, important day, her wedding day. The newlyweds stepped out of the church, gold wedding bands gleaming on their fingers. They got into a fancy white limousine and were about to leave when, suddenly, a little girl, about 7 years old, knocked on the car window. She was so thin and poorly dressed that it brought tears to Miranda's eyes. Shyly, the girl handed over a small but beautiful bouquet of chamomiles and asked, "Ma'am, would you like to buy it for happiness? It's not expensive, only $2. Miranda couldn't resist and bought the bouquet, giving the girl money from her wallet. Just then, she noticed the girl's braids, special braids with colorful ribbons, intricate, beautiful, and sophisticated. Only one person in the world could braid hair like that, her drowned friend, Grace. No matter how hard Miranda had tried, she could never replicate those braids. How did this little girl have such braids? Miranda jumped out of the limousine. Taking the girl aside, she quietly asked, "Sweetie, what's your name? Where are your parents? Don't be afraid. My name is Miranda. Maybe I can help you with something." The little girl replied in a frightened voice, "I'm Savannah. I'm 7 years old, and I live with my mom. She's very sick right now. She can hardly get up. There's no dad. Mom says he's a polar pilot on a distant expedition, but I don't believe it. I think he just left us. I'm selling these bouquets to collect money for my mom's surgery. I want her to get better. I love her so much. We live nearby, in the house with the yellow roof on the next street." An excited Miranda promised, "You know what? I'll come visit you in a couple of days. Can I? I'd love to meet your mom. Maybe I can help with something." Savannah nodded. "Okay, Miranda, come visit. I'll be waiting for you." Miranda hugged the little girl warmly and returned to her husband in the limousine. Her heart was restless, uneasy. What if this is my friend's daughter? She wondered. Maybe she didn't die, although, how is that even possible? 100 questions flooded her mind, but not a single answer emerged. Sensing her distress, Jason asked, "My dear, what happened? What were you talking about with that little one? You don't seem like yourself." Miranda replied in a trembling voice, "It's a long story. I'll explain everything later. Perhaps there's even a thread leading to my past that I'd rather not think about today on our wedding day. Let's just enjoy ourselves, my love." She gently kissed her husband, trying to shake off the unease. Despite her worries, the rest of the day went smoothly. Her treat was welcomed with joy and eaten with relish, the praise for it filling her with pride. It was important to her, and deeply pleasant, that the day had gone so well. The wedding was a success, followed by an unforgettable wedding night. For the next couple of days, Miranda couldn't bear to be away from Jason. She was absolutely happy. But as soon as life returned to its normal routine, Miranda hurried to visit Savannah as she had promised. With a racing heart, she called and knocked on the door, but no one answered. A small, cute dog barked in the yard. A neighbor, an elderly woman, came out and explained everything. Are you looking for Grace? They took her away in an ambulance yesterday. She's sick, poor thing. She's in the third city hospital. Miranda anxiously asked, and Savannah, her daughter? Where is she? The elderly woman sighed. Savannah's with me for now. She's sleeping. Her mother is dying, cancer, in the final stage. It seems that the girl will be sent to an orphanage, God forbid. What if something happens to Grace? I feel sorry for both of them. It's as if someone has cursed them. What is Grace's surname? I want to visit her in the hospital, Miranda asked. Bowles. And if you go to Grace, take these treats from me, the woman said, bringing out a few apples and pastries. Miranda grabbed the bag and rushed to the hospital, her mind racing. Lord, everything is coming together. The woman's name is Grace, just like my friend, but the surname is different, probably from her husband. Could it be? Her heart ached for poor Savannah. Fate was so cruel to the little girl. How could anyone envy her? She loved her mother so much, collecting every penny to help her get well again. At the hospital, a pleasant young nurse was sitting in the reception area. Miranda approached with a trembling voice. Miss, in which room is Grace Bowles? They brought her in an ambulance yesterday. I need to see her. The nurse replied indifferently. She passed away this morning. The doctors tried to revive her, but they couldn't save her. Our condolences. Are you a relative? Tears streamed down Miranda's face as she cursed herself. I'm too late. I didn't get to see my friend. I was too busy with my own life. Suddenly, an idea struck her. Can I at least say goodbye to her? Just for a few minutes, please? She's my childhood friend. There's no one closer. We haven't seen each other in years. The nurse hesitated, then aloud, we haven't taken the body to the morgue yet. You can stay with her for a few minutes, but not too long, or I'll get in trouble. I'll take you there now. Miranda followed the nurse, her legs barely holding her up. The body of a woman lay on a stretcher, covered with a sheet. Taking a deep breath, she crossed herself and resolutely opened the sheet. She almost screamed in shock. It wasn't Grace. This woman had an entirely different face, thin lips, and a different nose and hair. No, this was not the Grace she had known since childhood. Relief washed over Miranda as she covered the body back up. But then she thought of Savannah, how the little girl had lost her mother today and didn't even know it yet. What awaited her? A terrible orphanage. There couldn't be a worse place. The young nurse said quietly, I'm so sorry. She was so young, and now she's gone. We'll send the body to the morgue now, and then you can take care of the funeral. Will you be taking her personal belongings and documents? Nobody can come to see her at all. That's why I'm asking. Miranda swallowed hard. Yes, I'll take everything and handle the funeral. They handed her the deceased's belongings, a watch, a locket, and a small note. It was all that was left of the person. With trembling hands, Miranda opened the note and read, Savannah, my little daughter. I feel awful. I don't know if I'll live until morning. Whatever happens, remember that I love you more than anything in the world, more than life itself. You're my only family. Promise me that you'll study well, won't be mischievous, and that you'll be the happiest for my sake. Kisses, my little bunny. Your beloved Mum. The girl couldn't remember how she got home. She was shaking and trembling, and tears flowed nonstop, blurring her vision. The blue face of that woman was still vivid in her mind. Poor Savannah. Miranda was worried about how she would tell her husband everything, especially since she didn't have enough money for the funeral. Would Jason want to deal with this? In essence, Savannah and her mother were strangers, but Miranda couldn't just stand aside and isolate herself from the girl's problems. Her conscience wouldn't allow it. To distract herself, Miranda started preparing dinner, but everything kept slipping from her hands. The omelet burned. She cut her finger with a knife, and she broke a cup. Jason came home late, exhausted and worn out from work, which took a toll on him. His wife greeted him tenderly and began feeding him dinner, all while glancing at him, hesitating to start the difficult conversation. But he knew Miranda's character better than anyone else and immediately understood that something was bothering her. What's wrong, my dear? You look terrible. I can see that something happened. Don't keep me waiting. Tell me. Miranda exhaled and began to speak. Do you remember that little girl with braids who sold us a bouquet of daisies at the wedding? Well, even then, I almost fainted when I saw the braids in her hair. Only my friend from the orphanage, Grace, knew how to braid like that. When I asked Savannah what her mother's name was, and she replied that it was Grace, I was certain it might be her. Who knows? Maybe she didn't die back then. Remember I told you that they never found the body? I promised the girl that I would visit her, so I went there today. It turned out her mother was suffering from cancer and was in the hospital, and the little girl was staying with an elderly neighbor. I rushed there, and you won't believe it, they told me that Grace died this morning. I then asked the nurse to let me look at the body and say goodbye. I pulled back the sheet, and it wasn't her, not my Grace. Then the nurse asked me who would be taking care of the body, clothing, and organizing the funeral. They had no relatives. I quickly and emotionally said that I would take care of it. I didn't consult you, and I feel so sorry for Savannah. She's only 7 years old, such a wonderful girl. What awaits her? A children's home? I've been in that hellhole, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I've been crying all evening, and I can't do anything. I was afraid to tell you. You might say, why do we need to take on other people's problems? You'd probably scold me. Jason listened seriously without interrupting. Then he gently hugged Miranda. We've known each other for 6 months. Have I ever scolded you? What nonsense are you talking about? The situation is really difficult. The girl's mother has died, and there's no one to help her. It's a tragedy for a child. Not every adult can handle it. Of course, we'll give the woman a decent farewell. We're not in financial distress. As for the girl, if you'd like, we can take her into our family and become her guardians. We'll raise her properly. How about that? Miranda cried from an overflow of emotions and threw herself into her husband's arms, kissing him. How much I love you, Jason. You have a huge, kind heart. I'll pick up Savannah tomorrow. You don't mind? Let's help her get through her grief together. Then I'll arrange for the funeral and memorial service. I just don't know how to tell the girl that her mother has died. I can't bring myself to do it. Jason advised, tell her that her mom has been transferred to another hospital for long-term treatment, and she'll stay with us for a while. We'll see how it goes from there. The very next morning, Miranda went to the neighbor's house and whispered to her on the porch, Grace died yesterday. I'll take care of the funeral. My husband doesn't mind. The memorial service is at 2 o'clock tomorrow. One more thing, I want to adopt Savannah. I can't let the child end up in an orphanage. Can I take her today? The neighbor burst into tears and crossed herself, shaking her head. My God, what a tragedy. May Grace rest in peace. She was a good woman and so young. Why did this calamity befall her? Thank you for everything. I'm old already, and I couldn't keep Savannah with me. It's such a pity. She's an excellent girl, obedient and clever beyond her years. We'll all come to see Grace off and contribute what we can to the funeral. But I don't understand why you decided to help this family and worry so much. You're not related to them, are you? It's so strange. Nowadays, people are so cruel. If you fall on the street, God forbid, they'll just step over you and move on. Miranda sighed and replied, you see, I'm an orphan. I grew up in an orphanage and suffered a lot there. I can't let such a wonderful girl like Savannah end up there. That's all. The neighbor led Miranda into the house, where Savannah was delighted to see her. Oh, Miranda. You came? I'm so happy. I'm drawing and helping Mrs. Simmons, and I'm waiting for Mom to come home. She'll get better, won't she? The child looked so intently into Miranda's eyes that everything inside her shrank and twisted. The woman barely managed to hold back the tears that threatened to spill, and she began the difficult conversation. Savannah, my little sunshine, I have some news for you. Your mom was transferred to another hospital today, far away in the capital. Mrs. Simmons is already old and can't take care of you for long. I would like you to live with our family for a while. We hardly know each other, and it's a little strange, but please believe me, neither I nor my husband will hurt you. We will love you, play with you, and do everything we can to make you smile. So, What do you say? Do you agree? Savannah looked at Miranda as if she were an adult and said quietly, "Don't treat me like a little kid. You're lying about everything. Mom wasn't transferred anywhere. She died, didn't she? I overheard the doctors talking a long time ago, and I know that Mom was seriously ill. Tell me the truth. I want to say goodbye to her too." Miranda and her neighbor looked helplessly at each other, tears rolling down their faces. Finally, Miranda nodded and handed Savannah a note. "Your mom left this for you. Do you want to read it?" The girl shook her head, but eventually began to whisper the text quietly. With each word, tears ran down her thin, almost transparent cheeks. Savannah reread the note several times, holding onto it like the most precious treasure. She dug through her backpack and pulled out an impressive stack of bills and coins. Trembling, she handed them to Miranda and said, "This is what I collected for my mom's surgery, but she didn't make it. I want you to spend it on her funeral. Please let her be beautiful." Suddenly, Savannah hugged Miranda and burst into tears, no longer able to restrain herself as she processed the terrible truth. They sat like that for a long time, grieving together for the most precious person in the girl's life. The funeral was heavy, with only a few people in attendance, neighbors and a couple of Grace's former colleagues. Miranda did her best to fulfill the girl's request, and Grace lay in the coffin looking alive, beautifully dressed and covered in flowers. Savannah cried for a long time, saying goodbye to her mom, not allowing the coffin to be closed as she didn't want to let go of her dearest person. Miranda did her best to comfort Savannah, afraid that her psyche would be traumatized for life. But in the end, Savannah hugged Miranda trustingly and said, "Thank you for telling me the truth. I needed to say goodbye to my mom. I heard you want to adopt me, but why? I'm a stranger to you. You just feel sorry for me." Miranda was amazed by such adult judgments from a 7-year-old child. She was even confused but didn't lie this time. "Yes, I feel sorry for you. I don't want them to take you to the orphanage. I see that you're a smart and good girl. I think we will get along, and over time, you'll be able to love us as parents." Savannah quietly replied, "I will try very hard not to disappoint you and my mom." "Thank you." So Savannah began to live with Miranda's family. It wasn't easy at first. There were misunderstandings and character clashes. Savannah felt embarrassed and shy, struggling to adjust to her new home. She often cried in the evenings, missing her mom and rereading the note. The adults were patient, not pressuring her, and comforted her as best they could. Gradually, she accepted and loved Miranda and Jason as if they were her own. After 6 months, Savannah rushed into Jason's office joyfully shouting, "Dad, let's go eat." "Mom, Miranda baked such a pie, you'll love it." The man picked up the girl, kissing her cheeks. "I'm coming, my good girl. Just don't take the biggest piece." Jason never regretted his decision to adopt Savannah. Her arrival made the family complete, and they all took care of her. Jason's parents were also understanding and enjoyed taking care of their new granddaughter, amazed by her independence and mature judgment. Miranda and Savannah often visited the cemetery to tend to Grace's grave, where they had placed a gravestone. The child would sit for a long time on a bench, looking at the photo of her loved one and remembering various stories from her childhood. However, the story of Savannah's braids still troubled Miranda. She felt that there was some secret associated with them, but she couldn't solve it yet. Then, as if by chance, Grace appeared in Miranda's dream. They sat together on the windowsill, just as they had in childhood, and Grace braided Miranda's hair with the same intricate style. "Don't worry, my friend. Savannah will tell you where to find me," Grace said. Miranda woke up in a cold sweat, feeling chills all over her body. The next morning, while getting her daughter ready for school, Miranda asked cautiously, "Sweetie, did your mom have any friends by any chance? Do you know who taught your mom to braid your hair so beautifully?" The girl nodded her head affirmatively, chewing on a cheese and sausage sandwich. "She had a colleague. Her name was Grace. She taught my mom to make all kinds of beautiful hairstyles. Aunt Grace was nice. She always brought me candy." "Where does she live? Have you ever visited her?" Miranda asked. "They put her in jail when I was 6 years old." Aunt Grace worked at a store with my mom, and they said she stole a lot of money there, the girl answered. Miranda felt uncomfortable. Did Grace survive and go down the wrong path, resorting to theft? She asked again, so, did Aunt Grace steal that money? Did your mother say anything? Savannah replied, Mom said she wasn't guilty of anything and that the director deliberately accused her. I don't know why, and I never understood it. Miranda's heart sank. She had carried the guilt of Grace's death throughout her childhood, and it was now crucial for her to uncover the truth and help her friend if she could. But without Jason's help, she couldn't do it alone this time. She immediately told her husband everything and asked for his help directly. I have good acquaintances in the police, Jason replied. Write me your friend's name, surname, patronymic, and year of birth, and maybe I can check my channels to find out if such a citizen is in jail. Miranda kissed her husband tenderly. Thank you, dear. You are my magician. I love you. A few days later, Jason brought home the address of the colony where Grace was serving her time. The prison was a 3-day train ride away, and the charge was large-scale theft. Miranda trembled with anticipation and disbelief. Jason, my dear, I must talk to her. I need to look her in the eye. I just can't believe that Grace is a thief. She couldn't stand theft and injustice in the orphanage. You know, Grace was like a sister to me, closer even. She saved my life. Otherwise, I would have been gone long ago. Jason kissed his wife on the head and hugged her. I anticipated this. My acquaintances promised to arrange a meeting. You'll go talk to your friend and find out everything. If she's innocent, we'll help however we can. Miranda squealed with joy. My darling, thank you for understanding me. 2 weeks later, Miranda entrusted Mrs. Simmons with looking after Savannah during the day, bringing her home from school and feeding her. Meanwhile, she set out to see her dear friend Grace, whom she thought was dead. You have 2 hours. Time's up, said the guard, and Miranda finally saw her friend. She barely recognized her in this tortured, emaciated, tall woman. Grace's once cheerful blue eyes were now detached and lifeless. But when Grace saw Miranda in front of her, she immediately recognized her, smiled joyfully, and rushed to hug her. For the first 10 minutes, they just cried and hugged, and then they couldn't stop talking. Miranda, my God. I thought you died. They declared you drowned. There were funerals. I mourned so much and blamed myself for your death. How happy I am that you are alive. Tell me everything. Grace sighed and began to tell her story. I couldn't swim out. I only managed to push you out, and I ran out of strength myself. The current carried me down a kilometer. I must have lost consciousness because I woke up at home, lying in bed, unable to understand anything. I had a cough that choked me. I could hardly breathe, and I felt so bad. It turned out that I was saved by an elderly fisherman who took me in and brought me to his home. He lived in an almost abandoned village with his wife. Many years ago, their little daughter drowned, and they had no more children, so they decided not to give me away. They believed the Lord sent me to them for comfort in their old age. I was sick for a long time, and they took care of me, treating me with herbs, decoctions, and steam baths. Gradually, I recovered and stayed with them. They were good, kind people who sincerely loved me, and I gradually got used to them. I helped them in the garden and around the house and finished rural school. Then I went to the city to find a job. Without education and experience, I couldn't get anywhere, but I managed to find a job in a store. My partner was a good person, also named Grace. She taught me everything and we became friends. But the owner of the store had his eye on me and made repeated hints of intimacy. He was a very unpleasant person, and I refused him. Then Bruce began threatening me, saying that if I didn't become more compliant, he would cause big trouble for me. I should have quit quietly while I still could, but I didn't take his threats seriously. Then, during my shift, all the money for the week disappeared without a trace from the cash register. Bruce called me a thief, called the police, and all that money was found in my bag. But I didn't take it, I swear. You know me, I won't take what belongs to others. I was sentenced to 2 years in court. It was such a blow to me, such a shame. I was shamelessly slandered. No matter how much I protested my innocence, no one listened to me. Bruce simply framed me, but I couldn't prove it. I've already served a year for nothing, but I'm losing strength. I feel so apathetic. I don't even want to live. This place is such a hell that life in an orphanage seems sweeter than honey. What's next? Who will need me with the stigma of being a prisoner for life? The most annoying thing is that one worthless scoundrel ruined my whole life and got away with it. He lives his life while I suffer. Miranda couldn't take it anymore and started crying, hugging her friend again. Grace, don't talk like that. I need you. Aren't we sisters? We can review the case and reduce the sentence. I won't abandon you. I'll support you. Don't even dare to be melancholic. You're not alone now. I'll ask Jason to help again. He's a golden husband. He won't refuse. Grace suddenly asked, "Thank you, my friend, but how did you even find me?" Miranda laughed and replied, "Your braids helped me. I had just gotten married when a little girl named Savannah sold me a bouquet of daisies. Her mother's name was Grace, and I saw the braiding in her hair. It hit me like a bolt of lightning. Only you could braid like that. At first, I thought you were her mother, but I was wrong. Unfortunately, the woman died of cancer. I adopted Savannah, but your braids were still bothering me. So I slowly asked the little girl if her mother had any friends, and that's how I found out about you. Savannah told me you worked with her mother in a store, and then you were sent to prison. I never doubted for a minute that you were innocent because I know your character well. No matter how difficult things get, you won't steal. So I asked my husband, through his acquaintances, to find out where you were serving your sentence. He understood everything and even arranged a meeting for us." Grace was shocked and burst into tears. "My poor colleague, I feel so sorry for her. Such a young and good woman. You're amazing for not abandoning her daughter. I remember her well. I loved playing with her. Your husband seems to be a good man since he agreed to raise someone else's child as his own. I'm happy for you, Miranda, that your fate turned out well, unlike mine. I'm poor, I don't have love or a normal life, and it seems like it will never happen." Grace started crying again on her best friend's shoulder. Miranda comforted her. "Come on, what are you talking about? You're still young. When you get out, I'll help you. Everything will be fine, you'll see. You need to believe in good things and not think about revenge. Fate will punish that scoundrel Bruce anyway. Just hold out a little longer, and I'll get you out of here." They said warm goodbyes, and Miranda went home determined to help Grace no matter what. Once again, her loyal knight, Jason, did not disappoint. Grace's case was reviewed, and it turned out she was not the first person Bruce had framed. Other victims had refused to be near the shady businessman. They also managed to find the elderly cleaner who had accidentally seen Bruce putting money in Grace's purse. The elderly woman had been afraid of losing her job at the time and kept quiet. But the lawyer managed to persuade her to testify against Bruce, especially since she was already retired and had nothing to lose. After a second hearing, the woman was acquitted and released early. Her conviction was annulled. It was the happiest day in the lives of both girlfriends. Miranda prepared a warm welcome for Grace. Savannah was also thrilled, expressing her love for the guest by showing her collection of Smurfs and talking about her successes at school. Grace received a huge bath towel and a lavender-scented terry robe from her friend, then was taken to the shower and shown her room. The poor woman spent an hour washing away all her troubles and misfortunes in hot water, feeling happier than ever. When her head touched the silk pillow, Grace immediately fell into a sweet, peaceful sleep. She had never slept like this during her long stay in prison. Grace was incredibly grateful to Miranda for finding her, supporting her, bringing her into the family, and welcoming her so warmly. Watching how Miranda and Jason loved and respected each other, Grace sighed dreamily, thinking, if only I could meet such a golden man who would love, cherish, and pamper me. Jason took Savannah under his wing as a manager and rented a small, cozy apartment for Grace not far from their house. Grace was incredibly thankful to Miranda and her family for their help and support during the most difficult moment of her life. Soon, Grace's personal life began to improve. At work, she met Steven, who was a programmer in the same office. At first, he kept his distance, as she was the boss's protege. However, when he came to set up her computer, they got to know each other better. Stephen liked Grace. She was tall, had pretty blonde hair, and her blue, bottomless eyes were enchanting. Yet, the short, unremarkable, bespectacled Stephen did not impress Grace at all. She simply became friends with him. They often drank coffee together, shared secrets, and chatted about various topics. The guy frequently complimented her and was always ready to help, whether it was with repairs in her apartment or fixing her computer. He hoped that Grace would appreciate his efforts and understand that he liked her madly. However, the girl did not see Stephen as a potential partner and only regarded him as a friend. Several months passed and Jason, Miranda's husband, celebrated his birthday party at a restaurant filled with guests, mostly families and couples. Grace brought Stephen with her so she wouldn't be alone. The guy had carefully prepared, dressed in a suit and tie, and proudly walked into the restaurant hand in hand with Grace. However, Grace felt a bit self-conscious since Stephen was half a head shorter than her, and she hurried to sit down at the table. The fun was in full swing, with Stephen inviting Grace to all the slow dances and charming her with his gallantry. He was simply thrilled with his blue-eyed companion, who looked like a beautiful fairy in a flowing chiffon dress and elegant high-heeled shoes. Miranda, who was covertly watching all the guests, couldn't resist approaching her friend with a glass of champagne. Leaning in, she whispered in Grace's ear, "Congratulations. Do you finally have a suitor? Why didn't I know anything about him?" "Who's Stephen?" Grace asked, surprised. "What kind of suitor is he?" "He's just a friend of mine." Miranda shook her head. "You're wrong, girlfriend. Stephen has a crush on you. Jason told me about him. He's a valuable and promising employee, and he's a good person. So take a closer look, or you might miss your chance for happiness." They raised their glasses to the birthday boy's health, and Miranda returned to her husband's table. Meanwhile, after her friend's words, Grace took a closer look at Stephen. She smiled, winked at him, and pulled him onto the dance floor. It turned out he moved excellently, and soon they both became hot and flustered from the dancing. They each drank a glass of mineral water and stepped outside to breathe some fresh air and cool down. "Wow, Stephen, you're astonishing. You dance so well. I've never had this much fun before," Grace exclaimed, amazed. Having had a bit to drink, Stephen grew bold. He suddenly pulled Grace toward him and kissed her eagerly. "Not only can I dance well, but I also know how to cook and give massages. So marry me, Grace. I'll be the most faithful and devoted partner. I can't live without you. You're like an obsession, a star in the sky. You settled in my heart from the first moment I saw you. Do you not like me at all?" Grace was stunned, her head spinning. She hadn't suspected that Stephen was in love with her, and it felt incredibly pleasant. Decisively, she replied, "Kiss me again. Otherwise, I'm not sure if I understood everything correctly." Overjoyed, Stephen scooped her up in his arms, and they began kissing passionately. Then, to dispel any lingering doubts, Grace asked a delicate question. "What if I tell you I'm a former inmate? I spent a year in prison for something I didn't do. I'm also an orphan with no family or kin. Do you still love me? Plus, I'm not sure if I can have a baby. I caught a severe cold in jail and barely survived. I've never been with a man." Stephen listened attentively and replied, "Even if you had 5 children, I would love them as my own. I don't care about your past. I want to ensure you have a happy future with me. Love is either there or it's not. You don't love someone for something. It's a gift from God." Relieved, Grace began dating Stephen, who enveloped her in such care, love, tenderness, and affection that she quickly forgot about his glasses and short stature. She saw in him the best, most beloved, and reliable man in the world. A week later, they applied for the registry office, and 2 months later, they got married. Soon after, Grace became pregnant. One day, Stephen and Jason were having lunch together. "Jason, may I congratulate you on expecting a baby?" Stephen said. Jason objected. "Why do you think so?" Of course, I'd be happy, but unfortunately, nothing has happened yet. Thank goodness we have Savannah. Stephen replied, "Don't you see how your wife has changed? She has noticeably rounded out and become more beautiful, almost unrecognizable. Maybe I'm wrong, but she looks so much like a pregnant woman." Jason paused and suddenly realized that Miranda had indeed changed lately. Miranda had become sleepy and absent-minded, often dozing off while on the go. It was strange. She had gained a little weight, but Jason found it appealing. She looked even more attractive and appetizing than before. That night, unable to contain himself any longer, Jason asked directly, "Darling, are you pregnant by any chance? You've changed so much lately." Miranda laughed cheerfully. "Well, you can't hide anything from you. You spoiled the surprise. Yes, I'm pregnant. My best friend and I managed to get pregnant almost at the same time without even planning it. It's some kind of miracle. But Grace and I wanted to go for an ultrasound together first before I told you. Do you want to come with us?" Jason jumped up on the bed, wide awake, hugging and kissing Miranda. "My good girl. Finally, God gave us a baby. I've been dreaming about this. Make sure not to overwork yourself and get plenty of rest and vitamins. Of course, I'll go with you." Miranda's dream had come true. She was expecting a boy, just like her best friend Grace. Their due dates were almost the same, which thrilled both women because their children would grow up together, socialize, and be friends. The only thing left was to tell Savannah the news without making her jealous or upset. The four adults spent a whole day brainstorming and rehearsing how to break the news, with each attempt worse than the last. Finally, when Savannah came home from school and had lunch, Miranda and Jason took a deep breath and decided to talk to her. "Sweetheart, Daddy and I want to tell you something important. Be honest, would you like to have a little brother or sister? It would be great, right? We could all bathe the baby and play with him. You will always be our beloved daughter. Remember, we won't love you any less." Savannah exhaled and responded seriously, like an adult. "Well, you're just like little kids. Don't worry so much. I'm not upset. On the contrary, I'm happy that I'll be able to play with a real baby doll, not a fake one. Besides, I'm the older sister, so the baby will listen to me. Just don't let him misbehave too much. I know how those boys can be." Jason laughed heartily, picking Savannah up and hugging her. "Oh, our daughter is growing up so smart. Our baby will have a great role model. I have an important mission for you. Watch over Mommy while I'm not home. Make sure she doesn't do any heavy lifting. She needs to take care of herself now. And this weekend, we'll go to the countryside with Grace and Stephen. We'll swim, sunbathe, and grill delicious kebabs. I promised to teach you how to bake potatoes on the coals, didn't I?" Savannah shouted, "Hooray!" and started running around the room, her seriousness vanishing instantly. By chance and fate, the best friends who seemed torn apart forever were reunited again. The women cherished their friendship deeply and were always ready to help each other. As for the scoundrel Bruce, fate finally caught up with him. First, he took Grace's place in jail, and when he was released, his business had long been destroyed by competitors. He spent the rest of his life in a smoky room, working as an ordinary janitor. After all, he got exactly what he deserved.